Most locomotives disappear when their manufacturers do. Parts become scarce, support vanishes, and the machines slowly fade into history. But not these. Some were built by companies that collapsed decades ago. Others came from countries that no longer even exist. Yet, against all odds, they kept running, hauling freight, climbing mountains, and surviving conditions that destroyed newer locomotives. These aren't just old trains. They're mechanical survivors that refuse to die. Here are 10 weird locomotives so tough they actually outlived the companies that built them. Number 10. Shay geared locomotive. Most steam locomotives were designed with one goal in mind: speed. The Shay locomotive was built for something completely different. It was designed to go where normal locomotives couldn't, and that's exactly why it became one of the toughest locomotives ever created. The Shay was invented by Michigan lumberman Ephraim Shay during the late 19th century and was primarily manufactured by Lima Locomotive Works beginning in the 1880s. At first glance, it looked almost unfinished. Instead of the familiar arrangement of large driving wheels connected by side rods, the Shay featured exposed gears, a long drive shaft running along one side of the locomotive, and cylinders mounted off-center. To many railroad workers seeing one for the first time, it looked more like a giant industrial machine than a locomotive. But every part of that strange design served a purpose. Logging railroads were often built quickly and cheaply. Tracks twisted through forests, climbed steep grades, crossed temporary bridges, and followed routes that changed constantly as timber operations moved. Conventional locomotives struggled in these conditions. Their large driving wheels were designed for speed, not traction. The Shay, however, used gears to power every axle. This gave it tremendous pulling power at very low speeds and allowed it to climb grades that would stop many ordinary locomotives in their tracks. The design proved so successful that more than 2,700 Shay locomotives were eventually built. They worked in forests, mines, quarries, and industrial railroads across North America and around the world. What's truly remarkable is how long they survived. Lima Locomotive Works eventually disappeared through mergers and restructuring during the mid-20th century. Yet many Shay locomotives kept operating long after their manufacturer was gone. Some remained in industrial service for decades. Others found new lives on tourist railroads and preservation lines. Today, more than a century after many of them were built, several Shay locomotives are still operational. Think about that for a moment. These machines have outlasted world wars, economic depressions, countless technological revolutions, and even the company that built them. That's not just durability, that's mechanical immortality. Number 9. Fairlie double-ended locomotive. If someone showed you a Fairlie locomotive without any explanation, you might assume two locomotives had somehow been connected together by mistake. That's because the Fairlie is one of the strangest-looking locomotives ever placed on rails. Designed by Scottish engineer Robert Francis Fairlie in the 1860s, the locomotive challenged almost every convention of railway design. Instead of having a clear front and rear, it was essentially symmetrical. There was a smokebox and chimney at each end, while the crew worked from a cab positioned in the center. The locomotive was mounted on two powered bogies, allowing it to distribute weight evenly and navigate sharp curves with ease. The unusual design wasn't created simply to look different. It solved several real-world problems. Many narrow-gauge railways operated in mountainous terrain where space was limited. Building large turning facilities was often expensive or impossible. Conventional locomotives had to be turned around before making return trips. The Fairlie eliminated that requirement completely. Since it was effectively facing both directions at once, it could simply reverse and continue operating. This made it especially useful on difficult mountain railways, where flexibility mattered more than speed. One of the most famous homes of the Fairlie locomotive became the narrow-gauge railways of Wales. There, these locomotives demonstrated incredible pulling power despite their relatively compact size. They hauled heavy trains through steep grades and tight curves that would challenge many larger locomotives. The companies involved in manufacturing early Fairlie locomotives disappeared long ago. Many 19th century locomotive builders simply did not survive into the modern era. Yet the locomotives themselves proved remarkably resilient. Perhaps the greatest testament to the design is that several Fairlie locomotives remain operational today. Some continue hauling passenger trains on heritage railways, performing the same tasks they were designed for more than a century ago. It's rare for any machine to survive that long. It's even rarer for it to remain useful. The Fairlie achieved both. While countless locomotive designs faded into obscurity, this strange double-ended machine became a living piece of railway history that continues to outlive the companies responsible for its creation. Number 8. Morrison Cundy's MK5000C. Most locomotives disappear when their manufacturers disappear. The Morrison Knudsen MK5000C did the exact opposite. It survived long after the company that built it faded from the railroad industry. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, American railroads were demanding more horsepower than ever before. Freight trains were becoming longer, heavier, and more demanding, especially across the steep grades of the western United States. Morrison Knudsen, a company better known for major construction and engineering projects, decided to challenge the established locomotive giants by building a powerful new freight locomotive. The result was the MK5000C. Introduced in 1994, the MK5000C was one of the most powerful diesel locomotives in North America, producing approximately 5,000 horsepower. Its massive frame, oversized radiator section, and 6-axle configuration gave it an intimidating appearance that matched its performance. Built primarily for heavy-haul freight service, the locomotive was designed to move enormous loads through mountains, deserts, and difficult terrain where raw pulling power mattered most. Southern Pacific Railroad became the primary operator of the fleet. Crews quickly discovered that the MK5000C excelled on steep grades and demanding freight assignments. Although the locomotive was not perfect, its impressive power made it a valuable asset on some of the toughest routes in the country. Ironically, while the locomotives continued working, Morrison Knudsen's locomotive division struggled to survive. Financial difficulties and industry competition eventually forced the company out of locomotive manufacturing. Yet the MK5000C refused to disappear. Many units remained in service for years, some being rebuilt and reassigned to new railroads. Long after the Morrison Knudsen name vanished from locomotive production, these powerful machines continued hauling freight across North America. The MK5000C stands as proof that sometimes a machine can outlive not only its competition, but the very company that created it. Number 7. Soviet T3 Diesel. The Soviet Union built machines with a very different philosophy from many Western manufacturers. Instead of focusing on elegance, comfort, or appearance, Soviet engineers often prioritized one thing above all else: survival. Few locomotives demonstrate that philosophy better than the TE3 diesel. Introduced in the early 1950s, the TE3 was designed to replace steam locomotives across the vast Soviet rail network. It consisted of two permanently coupled units that operated together as a single locomotive. The design wasn't particularly beautiful. It lacked the streamlined styling seen on many Western locomotives of the era. But what it lacked in appearance, it made up for in toughness. And toughness was exactly what Soviet railways needed. The TE3 operated across one of the largest rail networks on Earth. It hauled freight through Siberian winters, crossed remote deserts in Central Asia, and worked in regions where maintenance facilities were often hundreds of miles apart. Temperatures could plunge far below freezing for months at a time. In many places, reliability wasn't just important, it was essential. The locomotive proved remarkably capable under these extreme conditions. More than 6,800 TE3 units were produced, making it one of the most successful diesel locomotives in Soviet history. They became a common sight across the USSR and played a major role in the country's transition away from steam power. Then came a historic turning point. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. The nation that had designed, built, and operated the TE3 ceased to exist. Many factories associated with locomotive production were reorganized, privatized, renamed, or closed entirely. Yet the locomotives themselves refused to disappear. For years, and in some places decades after the collapse of the Soviet Union, TE3 locomotives continued hauling trains. they remained active across multiple newly independent countries, serving railways that no longer belonged to the nation that created them. That level of longevity is extraordinary. These locomotives not only outlived many of the factories that built them, they outlived the country itself. Few machines can make that claim. The TAE3 wasn't flashy, it wasn't revolutionary, but its incredible durability turned it into one of the greatest locomotive survivors ever built. Number 6. Climax geared locomotive. During the golden age of logging railroads, engineers faced a challenge that conventional locomotives simply weren't designed to handle. Forest railways were rough, temporary, and often built with little concern for perfection. Tracks twisted through mountains, crossed makeshift bridges, and climbed grades that seemed impossible. Under these conditions, speed meant nothing. What mattered was traction, reliability, and the ability to keep moving when everything else failed. That's where the Climax locomotive came in. Built by the Climax Manufacturing Company beginning in the late 19th century, the Climax was one of America's most unusual geared steam locomotives. At first glance, it looked almost homemade compared to sleek passenger locomotives of the era. Its boiler sat above a complex drivetrain that ran underneath the locomotive. Instead of using traditional driving rods, power was transferred through a central drive shaft connected to geared trucks beneath the frame. The result was extraordinary pulling power at low speeds. The Climax could crawl up steep grades while hauling heavy loads of logs, coal, or ore. It could operate on rough track that would have been considered unacceptable for most railroads. In many ways, it was less of a train and more of a mountain climbing machine built on rails. Between the 1880s and the 1920s, more than 1,000 Climax locomotives were produced. They worked throughout North America and in several foreign countries. Logging companies especially loved them because they could reach areas where ordinary locomotives simply couldn't go. The Climax Manufacturing Company eventually disappeared from locomotive production, becoming another name lost to industrial history. But the locomotives themselves proved far more durable than the company that built them. Several Climax locomotives survived long enough to enter preservation. Even more impressive, a number of them remain operational today. Some are still capable of hauling trains more than a century after they left the factory. Think about how incredible that is. The company vanished generations ago. Entire industries changed. Steam locomotives disappeared from mainstream service. Yet these strange geared machines continue to move under their own power. Few locomotives better demonstrate the idea of outliving their makers than the rugged and unforgettable Climax. Number 5. Alco RS3. When railroad historians discuss locomotive builders that disappeared too soon, one name always enters the conversation: Alco, the American Locomotive Company. For decades, Alco was one of the giants of the railroad industry. During the steam era, it produced thousands of locomotives that worked across North America and around the world. But as diesel power took over after World War II, competition intensified. By 1969, Alco had left the locomotive manufacturing business altogether. Yet one of its creations refused to fade away. Introduced in 1950, the RS3 was part of Alco's highly successful road switcher series. At a time when railroads wanted locomotives capable of handling both yard switching and mainline freight service, the RS3 offered the perfect balance. It was compact, versatile, and powerful enough for a wide variety of jobs. Its appearance wasn't particularly glamorous. The locomotive featured a practical boxy body and a long hood design that became common among American diesels. But railroad workers quickly learned that the RS3 was far tougher than it looked. Powered by Alco's reliable diesel engine, the locomotive proved capable of handling demanding service year after year. It worked on major railroads, short lines, industrial operations, and even overseas rail systems. More than 1,400 units were built, making it one of Alco's most successful diesel locomotives. Then came the ultimate test. When Alco exited locomotive production, support for its products gradually became more difficult. Many expected Alco locomotives to disappear as newer models replaced them. Instead, countless RS3s kept working. Some railroads rebuilt them, others upgraded them with modern components. Many found second careers on smaller railroads, where reliability mattered more than cutting-edge technology. Their simple construction and rugged design made them easier to maintain than many newer locomotives. Even today, preserved RS3s can be found operating on tourist railroads and museums. Decades after Alco disappeared from locomotive manufacturing, these machines continue to demonstrate why they earned such a loyal following. The RS3 didn't survive because it was revolutionary. It survived because it was built right. And sometimes, that's the most effective way for a machine to outlive its maker. Number 4. South African Class 25 Condensing Locomotive. Some locomotives were built to haul freight. Others were built to pull passenger trains. The South African Class 25 condensing locomotive was built to solve a problem that most railroads never had to face: water. In many parts of South Africa, steam locomotives faced a serious challenge. Large stretches of railway crossed dry regions where water supplies were scarce. Conventional steam locomotives consumed enormous amounts of water, forcing railroads to construct expensive watering facilities across remote areas. Engineers needed a solution. The answer arrived in the 1950s in the form of one of the strangest steam locomotives ever built. The Class 25 condensing locomotive featured a massive specialized tender, unlike anything seen on most railways. Instead of allowing steam to escape into the atmosphere after use, the locomotive captured much of it and condensed it back into water. This recycled water could then be reused by the boiler. The system dramatically reduced water consumption, allowing the locomotive to travel much greater distances between water stops. From the outside, the locomotive looked extraordinary. Its enormous condensing tender made it appear far larger than ordinary steam locomotives. Large radiators and cooling equipment covered the tender, giving it a futuristic appearance that stood out even among other advanced steam designs. The engineering involved was incredibly complex. Yet despite that complexity, the locomotives performed remarkably well under difficult operating conditions. Only a relatively small number were built, making them rare from the beginning. But they quickly earned a reputation as some of the most technologically sophisticated steam locomotives ever placed into regular service. Over time, diesel locomotives replaced steam across South Africa. The manufacturers and industrial organizations involved in producing these locomotives changed significantly through mergers, restructuring, and modernization. Some disappeared entirely, yet the locomotives themselves survived. Several examples were preserved, allowing future generations to see one of the most ambitious steam locomotive projects ever attempted. Today, railway enthusiasts consider the Class 25 condensing locomotive one of the greatest engineering achievements of the steam era. It wasn't just strange. It wasn't just advanced. It was proof that necessity can produce some of the most remarkable machines in railroad history. Number 3. Alco C636. If locomotives had personalities, the Alco C636 would probably be remembered as a heavyweight prizefighter. Everything about this machine was massive. Its size, its power, its appearance, and its reputation all reflected one simple purpose: moving enormous amounts of freight. Introduced in 1967 by the American Locomotive Company, the C636 represented Alco's final push to compete against industry giants such as EMD and General Electric. At the time, railroads were demanding more horsepower than ever before. Freight trains were becoming longer, heavier, and more demanding. To meet those needs, Alco developed one of the most powerful diesel locomotives it had ever built. The result was the C636. Producing 3,600 horsepower, it was among the most powerful single-engine diesel locomotives available in North America during its era. Mounted on 6 axles, the locomotive was designed for heavy freight service where maximum pulling power mattered more than speed. Its appearance matched its capabilities. The long hood, large radiator section, and aggressive stance gave it a commanding presence on the rails. Railroad crews often described it as a brute force machine built to tackle the toughest assignments. But timing wasn't on Alco's side. Despite the locomotive's impressive capabilities, Alco was struggling financially. Competition from rival manufacturers continued to intensify. Only a few years after introducing the C636, Alco abandoned locomotive production entirely. For many companies, that would have been the end of the story. For the C636, it was only the beginning. Many of these locomotives continued working for decades after Alco disappeared from the industry. Some were sold to regional railroads. Others found new homes in industrial operations and foreign rail systems. Their powerful engines and durable construction allowed them to remain useful long after newer locomotives entered service. Even today, surviving examples can be found in museums and preservation collections, standing as reminders of Alco's final attempt to challenge its competitors. The company that built them may be gone, but the C636 remains one of the strongest symbols of Alco's engineering legacy. A locomotive so tough that it kept working long after its maker had vanished from the railroad business. Number 2. Heisler Geared Locomotive. Among the strange geared locomotives that conquered America's forests and mountains, the Heisler may have been the most underrated. It never achieved the fame of the Shay, and it wasn't produced in the same numbers, yet many railroad historians consider it one of the most refined geared locomotive designs ever built. The Heisler locomotive was patented by Charles L. Heisler in the 1890s and later produced by the Heisler Locomotive Works of Erie, Pennsylvania. At first glance, it looked more conventional than its geared competitors, but hidden beneath the boiler was a remarkably clever drivetrain that made the locomotive both powerful and efficient. Unlike the Shay, which used cylinders mounted on one side of the locomotive, the Heisler used two steam cylinders arranged in a V shape beneath the boiler. These cylinders drove a central drive shaft running underneath the locomotive. The drive shaft then transmitted power through gears to all the wheels. This design offered several advantages. The locomotive delivered excellent traction while maintaining smoother operation at higher speeds than many other geared locomotives. Logging companies, mining operations, and industrial railroads quickly recognized its value. It could haul heavy loads over steep grades, rough track, and sharp curves without sacrificing reliability. And reliability was everything in remote wilderness operations. When a locomotive broke down deep in a forest, repairs could be expensive and time-consuming. Companies needed machines they could trust. The Heisler earned that trust through years of dependable service. More than 600 Heislers were built, and many spent decades working in some of the harshest environments imaginable. They hauled timber from remote mountain forests, transported ore from isolated mines, and operated on railroads where track conditions would have horrified engineers on major mainline routes. Eventually, changing technology and the rise of diesel power brought the geared locomotive era to an end. The Heisler Locomotive Works faded into history, joining countless other manufacturers that disappeared during the 20th century. But the locomotives themselves weren't finished. Several Heislers survived long enough to enter preservation, and a number remain operational today. Some are over 100 years old and still capable of hauling trains under their own power. Think about that. These machines were designed during an era when automobiles were still a novelty. They survived 2 world wars, the rise of aviation, the diesel revolution, the computer age, and the disappearance of the company that built them. For a locomotive designed to work in the shadows of forests and mountains, that's an extraordinary legacy. The Heisler may not be the most famous geared locomotive ever built, but few can match its reputation for durability and survival. Number 1. Dr. Yellow Locomotive. Most locomotives on this list survived because they were simple, rugged machines built to endure harsh conditions. Dr. Yellow is different. Its survival story isn't about brute strength. It's about remaining useful in one of the most technologically advanced railway systems ever created. Japan's Shinkansen network is famous around the world for speed, precision, and reliability. Since the first bullet trains entered service in 1964, generations of increasingly advanced trains have appeared. Models that were once considered revolutionary have been retired and replaced by faster, more efficient successors. Yet one unusual train continued to hold a special place on the network, known as Dr. Yellow. This bright yellow inspection train became one of the most famous railway vehicles in the world. While ordinary Shinkansen trains carried passengers, Dr. Yellow had a different mission. It was essentially a high-speed railway laboratory. As it traveled across Japan at full operating speed, sophisticated onboard equipment continuously monitored track conditions, overhead power lines, signaling systems, and other critical infrastructure. This allowed engineers to identify problems before they could affect regular passenger services. The train's distinctive yellow paint made it instantly recognizable. However, unlike normal passenger trains, its operating schedule was rarely announced publicly. This turned Dr. Yellow into something of a legend. Rail enthusiasts often considered spotting one a sign of good luck because sightings were relatively rare and unpredictable. What makes Dr. Yellow especially remarkable is its longevity. Over the decades, many generations of Shinkansen technology came and went. Manufacturers merged, reorganized, and evolved. Entire train fleets that were once considered cutting-edge disappeared from service. Yet Dr. Yellow continued performing its highly specialized role. Its continued operation demonstrated the exceptional engineering standards of Japan's railway industry. Rather than becoming obsolete, the train remained an essential tool for maintaining one of the safest and most reliable high-speed rail networks on Earth. For many people, Dr. Yellow became more than just a maintenance train. It became a cultural icon. Children recognized it, rail fans chased it, photographers waited hours for a chance to capture it passing by. Even as retirement approached for some Dr. Yellow train sets in recent years, their legacy was already secure. They had spent decades safeguarding the infrastructure that millions of passengers depended on every day. And that's why Dr. Yellow earns the #1 spot. Because while companies changed, technologies evolved, and entire generations of trains disappeared, this unusual yellow machine kept doing its job. Quietly, reliably, and largely behind the scenes, it outlived expectations and became one of the most beloved railway vehicles ever created. Some locomotives are remembered because they were powerful, others because they were strange. Dr. Yellow is remembered because it proved the machine doesn't need to haul freight or conquer mountains to become legendary. Sometimes, simply doing an important job exceptionally well for decades is enough to outlive almost everything around it. So that's it for today. If you like this video, then please hit the like and subscribe button for more videos. Thanks for watching.